Well, it's June. It's 1963, and you are watching the news. You would have seen a story about thousands of civil rights activists converging on Washington, D.C., to demand equal access to public facilities and end to the de jure segregation in the American South. Or maybe you watched the news in December 1955, when a seamstress named Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat to a white man, thereby kicking off a year-long boycott of the Montgomery, Alabama bus system. Or perhaps you were paying attention in November 1963, when a charismatic young preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech during the March on Washington. These were all pivotal moments in what is now known as the Civil Rights Movement, a decades-long struggle by African Americans to achieve equal rights and an end to racial discrimination. And if you want to better understand this crucial period in American history, then you've come to the right place. Before we jump into it, let's get some basics out of the way. First, what exactly do we mean when we talk about the Civil Rights Movement? Are we talking about a broad-based yet highly organized campaign to secure equal access to public facilities, and ultimately, an end to the legal code of racial segregation in the American South and the persistent cultural discrimination that pervaded the entire country? Second, when we say civil rights, what exactly does that entail? In short, the right to full and equal participation in American political, economic, and social life regardless of race. This included the right to vote, to travel freely, to access public accommodations, and to be free from police brutality. Third, keep in mind that the civil rights movement took place within the context of a much larger, global struggle against colonialism. By the mid-20th century, many African Americans had become acutely aware of how the United States simultaneously preached democracy and equality abroad while denying these very rights at home. So, with that in mind, let's get started. Though it was only in the mid-1950s and early 1960s that the modern civil rights movement began to take shape, the struggle for racial equality in the United States dates back to the nation's founding. Ever since the first Africans were brought to the United States as slaves in the early 18th century, Black Americans have been fighting for their basic human rights. After slavery was finally abolished in 1865, formerly enslaved people and their descendants continued to face persecution and discrimination. They were denied the right to vote, were subjected to horrific acts of violence, and were forced into a system of sharecropping that kept them trapped in poverty. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that things began to change. In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the case of Brown v. Board of Education that racial segregation in schools was unconstitutional. Though the decision was widely ignored in the American South, it nevertheless represented a major legal victory. 3 years later, after a seamstress named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama bus to a white man, the city's black community organized a year-long boycott of the bus system. The boycott, which was led by a young Martin Luther King Jr., resulted in the desegregation of Montgomery buses and helped to propel the former Baptist minister onto the national stage. From there, King's prominence grew with each successful nonviolent protest against racial segregation. In 1963, he organized the pivotal March on Washington, where some 250,000 people converged on the Capitol to demand equal access to jobs, housing, and education, and an end to the lingering effects of slavery. During the march, King delivered his now famous "I Have a Dream" speech, in which he articulated the movement's as central demands and its philosophy of nonviolent resistance. As the movement gained momentum, so too did the attacks against it. Many white Americans, both ordinary citizens and government officials, violently opposed any efforts to end racial segregation. But undeterred, activists across the country continued to organize sit-ins, freedom rides, and other nonviolent protests. One of the most prominent was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, whose members played a pivotal role in registering black voters in the American South. By the early 1960s, the movement had grown so powerful that even the federal government could not stop it. In 1964, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, which outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin. 2 years later, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 effectively ended the last vestiges of legal segregation in the American South. Though the movement had achieved many significant victories, the struggle for racial equality is far from over. Police brutality, racial profiling, and mass incarceration continued to disproportionately target Black Americans. And it will be a long time, if ever, that the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow is fully expunged from American society. So what can we learn from the civil rights movement? For one, the movement demonstrates just how powerful ordinary people can be when they work together to demand social change. Secondly, the movement offers an inspiring example of how nonviolent resistance can be an effective tool in the struggle against oppressive power structures. Finally, the movement reminds us that the struggle for equality is a universal one. As Dr. King famously said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." If you want to learn more about the civil rights movement, we have a whole playlist available. Thanks for watching.